بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. As we continue to progress in this very blessed text of Sidi ibn Aṭā'iyya Secondary radiallahu ta'ala anhu wa nafa'ana bih. Alhamdulillah, our progression has been very slow, however, that we're trying to take just one aphorism at a time because the commentaries on these aphorisms are so rich. It, at this point, is how we'll continue forward, inshallah ta'ala. And it helps us to look at each one from multiple angles when we try to consider what the various commentators have said. And for the most part, this is what we're trying to do, is to present what the ulama have brought out about these blessed aphorisms that are so important to the spiritual life of the believer, and that traveling the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is true staple food, sustenance that helps us. And even if we don't realize it in the moment, we'll realize it at some point, how important these aphorisms really are. And they require, though, a lot of thought and reflection. It's not enough to just kind of pass through them and just never revisit them. They really require a lot of reflection, and sometimes they might seem to be a little bit theoretical, but if you look a little bit more closely, you'll find practical ways of implementing them. And it might be kind of the first stage of implementation, and then as you progress in the spiritual path, there'll be other degrees to which that they can be put into practice. So we have reached number 24. And this aphorism states, لا تستغرب وقوع الأقدار ما دمت في هذه الدار فإنها ما أبرزت إلا ما هو مستحق وصفها وواجب نعتها. So Victor Danner translates this as, so long as you're in this world, be not surprised at the existence of sorrow, for truly it manifests nothing but what is in keeping with its character or its inevitable nature. Now, one of the things that I haven't really done all along is to offer too many variations of potential ways of translating it. But I'm starting to realize that some of them just really don't capture the meaning the way we want. So this is one of them that I attempted to reword and base it on some of what Victor Danner, how he translated, but then to add some different words as well. So I think the following conveys the meaning a little bit better. Do not be surprised by the occurrence of tribulations, aqdar, translating as tribulations as opposed to sorrow, as long as you are in this world. For it only brings forth, i.e. the world, its inherent characteristic and essential quality. So you can summarize this aphorism in the following way. This is about understanding the true nature of the world. What is the was? What is its sifa? What is its was? What is its nat? What is its characteristic and quality? And so, in terms of what is taken as a given, so that we don't think with some of the negative language about the world, we don't think that this is rooted in the sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ. I wanted to just quote a couple narrations. The first is in the collection of At-Tirmidhi, لو كانت الدنيا تعدل عند الله جناح بعوضة. Were this dunya to equal in the sight of Allah, janaha ba'udah, the wing of a gnat or a mosquito. Ma saqa kafiran minha sharbata ma. Allah Ta'ala would not have given a disbeliever a single sip of water. In other words, Allah gives the dunya to those whom He loves and to those whom He does not love. But He only gives the hereafter. He only gives the deen to those whom He loves. And in another narration, that it is narrated that our Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ جَلَّ ثَنَاهُ لَمْ يَخْلُقْ خَلْقًا أَبْغَضَ إِلَيْهِ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. Allah created nothing in creation that was more detestable to Him than the dunya. فَإِنَّهُ مُنْذُ خَلَقَهَا لَمْ يَنْظُرْ إِلَيْهَا. From that time that He created it, never did He gaze upon it. They say this is the nadratu fadlin. This is the gaze of bounty. In other words, the dunya in and of itself, as we see in another hadith, is mal'una, accursed. Mal'unun ma fiha, and accursed what is in it, illa dhikrullah, except for the remembrance of Allah. Wa ma wala, and that what brings you close to Allah. Wa alimun wa muta'allim, and a student, a scholar, and a student. In other words, the dunya in and of itself is not the abode of bliss. It's not the abode of reward. It's not the abode of permanence. It's not the abode where Allah Ta'ala has decreed for His beloved servants to remain. Were the dunya to have been special, He would have kept His most beloved creation, Sayyidina Muhammad, in it. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Every soul shall taste death. So this is the nature of this world. And it's important when we also say this, so we should consider this to be a part of what is taken as a given. When you speak about the dunya in a negative context, sometimes people start to panic and they start to think that that means is that you just become a recluse and you give up all of your possessions and that you don't talk to anyone and you sell your home and you become a vagabond and all these types of things, as people tend to criticize the people of this science. And I've actually been in gatherings where some of the, and I don't mean this pejoratively, but some of the uncles start to get a little bit worried when you're talking about the dunya, as if that people are going to start dropping out of college and quit their careers and kind of just throw the towel in and start begging or something like that because of some image that they have of people that claim to be from the people of Tasawwuf or claim to be Sufis. So people get a little bit nervous when you start talking about this, but that's ridiculous. Now, I understand what they mean, but I'm saying that's a ridiculous notion that you can't speak about the dunya as you're supposed to speak about it and think that it can't be understood in a balanced way. So ultimately, what we want is balance. But it is necessary for us to understand the dunya as it is, for our religion, for our deen, and especially for the spiritual path. This whole aphorism is dedicated to this, and it relates to the one that preceded it. And when we talk about aghyar and all these alterities, this otherness, we have to understand that this is the nature of the world in which we live. If we do not understand it as it's supposed to be understood, we will then get trapped in its many traps. So this is very, very important. This is why he includes it as his next aphorism. So let's look at the words one by one here. La tastaghrib. So this is La tastaghrib. This is a lam here for that nahi, which makes the fi'l jazm. And so la istaghraba yastaghribu is to find something strange or odd, such that you are surprised by it. Istaghrab. Something gharib is strange or odd. So la tastaghrib. Do not be surprised. You translate that here. But don't find it strange. Don't find it odd. What? Wuqu' al-aqdar. Waqa'a yaqa'u is for something to happen, something to occur. Okay? And so here, aqdar is the plural of qadr. Qadr. And aqdar, I kind of like tribulations to translate it. Sorrow is one of the types of aqdar. So aqdar here is with a kaf, not with a qaf. Aqdar is like the decree of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So the aqdar are tribulations, troubles, afflictions, hardships, adversity in general. Kullu ma yukaddar ala nafs. Everything that troubles you as a person. Wa yu'limuha, and brings about pain. So it comes from a root word kadira yakduru kadaran. Sara ghair safin. It's for mat, water, to become murky. Mat kadar is like murky water. So if you've ever seen some of those pictures of Mauritania, which many of you probably have, where many years ago when the likes of Shaykh Hamza, may Allah preserve him, studied there, the water that they were drinking, even you can see it in the photo, is discolored. Right? That's mat kadr. It's not pure, pristine water with nothing mixed in it. It's got an admixture of mud and dirt in it. So this is in relation to the water, but this is how our heart is. So our heart, if you imagine it like a container of water, when we go through troubles and afflictions and tribulations, it taints the purity of our spiritual containers. And so it affects then the way, just as when you drink water, it affects the taste, how you taste it, and it could affect your body essentially as well. But likewise, when we go through difficulties, it affects our state. It creates sometimes imbalance if we don't respond in a way that's pleasing to Allah. So aqdar are tribulations, all of those things that were mentioned. So لا تستغرب وقوع الأقدار. Do not be surprised by the occurrence of tribulations. ما دمت. Dam yadumu is as long as. ما دمت, as long as you, دمت, في هذه الدار. And dar is feminine, so هذه الدار. As long as you are in this abode, world. Dar. Dar al-dunya wa dar al-akhirah. Speak about the darain. Sa'adat al-darain, the felicity of this world and the next. So a dar is an abode. But it also literally means a house. It's like muradif for, it's a synonym of bait, of house. Okay? فَإِنَّهَا, so now he's going to explain why. فَإِنَّهَا, for it only, فَإِنَّهَا مَا أَبْرَزَتْ, it only brings forth. أَبْرَزَتْ أَظْهَرَتْ, it only manifests. I think brings forth conveys the meaning a little bit better. إِلَّا مَا هُوَ مُسْتَحَقُّ وَصْفِهَا, so the world only brings forth مَا هُوَ مُسْتَحَقُّ, this comes from إِسْتَحَقَّ إِسْتِحَقُّ, which is to deserve something, to be fit for something. أي ما تستحق أن توصف به. How it deserves to be described. So مستحق وصفها, its inherent characteristic. The wasf is the characteristic. وواجب نعتها. Wajib translated here probably best as essential. And essential quality. And some of them say wasf and nat are synonyms, and others differentiate between the two. However, that you could translate it as was mentioned, for it only brings forth its inherent characteristic and essential quality. Okay? Which is what? Is that as long as that we're here, there's all different types of states that we are going to go through. We're going to be sick, or we might be healthy. We're going to be happy, or we might be sad. وَهَكَذَا. And that we see life, and we see death, and we see that all different types of things that happen regular, or things that happen that seldomly. And we see tribulations, and we see civil strife, and we see people dying, or we see people's lives being taken, or we see that natural disasters of different sorts, that we see hurricanes, and we see earthquakes and tornadoes and all these different types of things, and tsunamis and so forth and so on. It's the nature of the world. And these things have been happening for centuries and centuries, and they continue to happen even in our time. So that is the linguistic breakdown. لا تستغرب وقوع الأقدار. So do not be surprised by the occurrence of tribulations as long as you are in this world, for it only brings forth its inherent characteristic and essential quality. So after previously talking about the importance of muraqabah, vigilance, i.e. being aware that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala sees us, and moving up in the degrees after that where we're in a state of mushahada, witnessing the divine impact upon creation, then he says that you want to prepare yourselves when you're watching over your heart to experience the world and to ready it for what is very likely to come your way at any given stage of your life, i.e. different types of tribulations. And he wants to prepare us now to understand that tribulations are merely the natural manifestations of the attributes of the world, the way the world is. But this is so important because the opposite, i.e. being surprised, if you're surprised by tribulations that come your way, that state of being surprised compromises the response that you need to have for the sake of Allah Ta'ala, which will then bar you from the spiritual path. As opposed to being ready for it, as opposed to expecting it and waiting for any moment, in any moment, having some type of tribulation come your way. Then you're going to be ready. So it's like when I walk around the block nearby here, there's this one house that they have a big, I think it's a golden lab, and they let it out to sometimes, and sometimes I'll do rounds around the block, and you'll just kind of get used to walking by and it's not there. And then all of a sudden you'll walk by and you're like 3 feet from the fence and you're like, oh, your heart, you get startled because of the loud bark of the dog. But like if you remember like, oh, that's the house, the dog could be out. If he starts barking, you still might, but you're prepared for the barking of the dog and you realize there's a fence, he's not going to get you, so you're not scared. Whereas if you just all of a sudden you don't know where the dog is, I mean, obviously he's probably behind the fence, but you're not prepared for it, so it startles you. Whereas if you're prepared for it, okay, you can then, okay, I'm going to adjust and get off of the sidewalk. Or at least just know that, oh, hey, the dog is there. And you're going to be able to bear it better as opposed to being startled. And so forth and so on. If you go into an interview, a job interview of some sort, or you go into some situation of arbitration where that you preempt in the situation, you have an idea of what has transpired and things that you need to say, and you kind of arrange your thoughts, you're likely to do much better than if you just have to be caught by surprise and respond in the moment. Now, some people can adjust, and it's good to be able to adjust. So on one hand, you have the idea of kind of the tipping point, which is that long, sustained study to figure out what are trends that need to be in place in order to create a tipping point. And generally speaking, tipping points happen after a sustained degree of gradual increase. And then it reaches a certain point, certain conditions arise, and then, right? But then you have the idea of thinking on the spot. So you have to plan ahead at certain times, but you also have to develop the skill of responding in the moment when you don't have the luxury of a lot of time to deliberate. In both are skills. You might be good at both, you might be bad at both, or you might be good at one and not the other. So sometimes you have to respond very quickly. And other times you have to really deliberate over matters to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Anyhow, in this world, for the things that we control, you do your best. And it starts with perspective. So there's a few quotes here that really hammer this point home. And Imam Junaid radiallahu anhu, he says, لست أستبشر ما يرد علي من العالم لأني أصلت أصلا وأن الدار دار هم وغم وبلاء وفتنة. So he says that I am not shocked by what happens to me in the world because I've understood its origin. And I realize that it is a dar, an abode of sorrow, of grief, of tribulation, of trial. وَأَنَّ الْعَالَمْ كُلُّهُ شَرٌّ, and that all of the different things that happen in it can drag you to evil. And from its nature is that it will meet me with what I dislike. And then at times, there might be certain things that I do like. But the source, the origin is the first, not the second. So all of us want to be young. Like we like to be young in general. We like to have the vigor of youth and to be able to exercise and to have flexible limbs. You like the resilience of your body. And then you reach 40, you're like, ooh, where'd that go? I can't perform on the basketball court like I could. I can't get away with that sleeping little like I could. I can't get away with these things that you could get away with when you're, and it catches up to you. And then you might get sick or something like that. Like, wake up call. We like to be young, but the nature of the dunya is every moment we're getting older. We get gray hair, and then we get wrinkles, and all these types of things start to happen. And then we start limping, and then our body starts to deteriorate, and so forth and so on. The nature of the world is that it's vanishing in the moment. Even things that we want, you have the most delicious food, you eat it, the taste is gone, khalas, and you're in the next moment already. And then you're left with the repercussions of what you did. And that eating good food from time to time is fine as long as it's not into excess. But the point here is, the nature of the world is that we're chasing something we can never really have. So the origin of the world is that it tends to bring about things that we dislike. And that's the asl, that's the foundation. And then at times there are things that we like and experience and that are sources of delight. So as one of the poets said, طُبِعَتْ عَلَى كَدَرٍ وَأَنْتَ تُرِيدُهَا. So the world has naturally been disposed to tribulation, and you want it. وَأَنْتَ تُرِيدُهَا. You're seeking it. صَفْوًا مِنَ الْأَكْدَاءِ وَالْأَكْدَارِ. And you want it to be pure of all turpidity or dissonance. وَمُكَلِّفَ الْأَيَّامِ ضِدَّ طِبَاعِهِ مُتَطَلِّبٌ فِي الْمَاءِ جَذْوَةِ النَّارِ. And you trying to find in the days of time something other than its true nature is like you trying to extract fire from water. You want fire, you have to go to a coal. You have to go to a material that's combustible. But if you want water, if you try to extract fire from water, it's a problem. And then from here we can understand some of the lines in Imam Haddad's poem, Alayya Allah bi nadra, which is the refrain, Min al-ayn al-rahima, tudawi kulla ma bi min amradin saqima. In one stanza he says that Alayya sah ya sah la tadza' wa tadjar. In poetry you can have the ba be omitted of sahib. So sah is sahib. That, O friend or O companion of mine, don't be anxious and irritated. وَسَلَّمْ لِلْمَقَادِيرِ كِي تُحْمَدْ وَتُؤْجَرْ. And submit to the decree of Allah, to the decrees, so you are praised and rewarded. It's for your own good. وَكُنْ رَاضٍ بِمَا قَدَّرَ الْمَوْلَى وَدَبَّرْ. And be content with what the Lord decrees and manages. وَلَا تَسْخَطْ قَضَى اللَّهُ رَبَّ الْعَرْشِ الْأَكْبَرِ. And do not resent the decree of Allah, the Lord of the greatest throne. And then so, in relation to the decree, and Imam Haddad does this consistently, many of these aphorisms, the deep meanings, he summarizes it in his beautiful poems. This is why he said, I placed in the Diwan, his collection of poetry, that which is not found in any of my books. Diwan has deep secrets, and it's one of the most spiritually uplifting things to do is to read with reflection the poems of Imam Abdullah bin Ali al-Haddad. So then, how do you respond to this? وَكُنْ صَابِرْ وَشَاكِرْ. And be patient and grateful. دُكُنْ فَائِزْ وَظَافِرْ. And you'll be successful and triumphant. وَمِنْ أَهْلِ السَّرَائِرِ. And from the people of innermost secrets. رِجَالُ اللَّهِ مِنْ كُلِّ ذِي قَلْبٍ مُنَوَّرٍ. The people of Allah, the possessors of luminous hearts. مُصَفَّى مِنْ جَمِيعِ الدَّنِسِ طَيِّبْ مُطَهَّرٍ. Cleansed of all filth, pure and unpolluted. And then what does he say? He starts to speak about the dunya then. ذِي الدُّنْيَا وَذِي الدُّنْيَا دَنِيَّةٌ حَوَادِثَا كَثِيرًا. And this world is lowly. And its misfortunes, its hawadith, all of the different occurrences and things that happen are many. وَعِيشَتْهَا حَقِيرًا. Its life is petty. Who really wants it? وَمُدَّتْهَا قَصِيرًا. And its time is short. وَلَا يَحْرَسْ عَلَيْهَا سِيمَا أَعْمَى الْبَصِيرًا. Only someone whose inner sight is blind seeks it. عَدِيمَ الْعَقْلِ. Oh, that his intellect is non-existent. لو كان يعقل كان أفكار. Had he used his intellect, he would be more reflective. So he says that the one who is really seeking the dunya, like really seeking the dunya, is adim al-aql. Like that person's intellect is non-existent. And if you think about it, how many people are seeking the dunya? All of us are seeking the dunya. We're not saying them. Look at our own selves, how much we love dunya. Let's keep it real. We love dunya. And then it's just degrees after that. But it's a blessing to recognize that you shouldn't love the dunya for the sake of the dunya. You can love the dunya insofar as it is a sign that points to the existence of Allah, and it is the mezra'ah, the seedbed of the hereafter. That's fine to love the dunya for that world. But then you're not loving the dunya intrinsically. You're loving the dunya for another purpose. Because it brings you to Allah, because it's the means for you to achieve the highest degree of closeness to Allah in the next world, and to be in the abode of bliss. So this is a great reminder. So then he says, "Tafakkar fi fanaha." Reflect on its perishing nature, how evanescent it is, it's going. وَفِي كَثْرَةِ أَنَاهَا, and the abundance of its difficulties. وَفِي قِلَّةِ غِنَاهَا, and how little its sufficiency is. SubhanAllah. وَطُوبَى ثُمَّ طُوبَى لِمَنْ مِنْهَا تَحَذَّرَ. Glad tidings to the one who is cautious regarding it. وَطَلَّقَهَا, and divorces it. وَفِي طَاعَةِ الرَّحْمَنِ شَمَّرَ, and then rolls up his sleeves too, that obey Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. So as that Shaykh Abu Bakr bin Salim said, that الدنيا بنت الآخرة. فمن تزوج البنت حرم عليه الأم. So that in sacred law, as soon as you marry a woman's daughter, then it is haram for you ever to marry her mother, even if you divorce her daughter. Whereas that if you are married to a woman and she has a sister, if you divorce her, you could marry her sister, okay, and so forth. But if she has, once you do the aqd, khalas, her mother, it's no longer permissible for you ever to marry her. So this is the nature of the dunya, is that man aqad alayha, once you kind of, established a union with the dunya, khalas, forget the hereafter. And obviously he doesn't mean that in the sense of you're trying to struggle to progress in the spiritual path, but just with a lack of awareness. In other words, is that it's like the east and west. And the more dunya you have in the heart, the less you have the hereafter. The more of the hereafter, the less necessarily of dunya that will be in the heart. And this is why we have to have times in our day, and in our week, and in our month, and in our year that are solely for the hereafter. Solely for the hereafter. When we stand and pray 5 times a day, those moments that we spend, hopefully that we're concentrating, may Allah forgive us for falling short, that's for the akhirah. That's not for the dunya. Other things that someone could be doing. That's time for the hereafter. Time that you sit and you remember Allah. That time is for the hereafter. Time that you spend learning sacred knowledge. That is an investment, and the best of investments, one of the best investments for the hereafter. And so forth and so on. And any moment that we spend doing something with a righteous intention, such that it becomes an act of obedience and an act of worship, is a moment that we're investing in the hereafter. And ideally, we follow in the footsteps of the righteous who came before us, where every single breath they take, every single step they take, every single moment of their lives is dedicated to the hereafter. And if you think about it, this is why the conversation of intention is so important. Because the intention unlocks your ability to be able to do that. So all of us are going to eat on a daily basis. But what is our intention when we eat? All of us are going to spend time, most of us are going to spend time with family on a daily basis. What is our intention when we spend time with family? Most of us are going to interact with people on a daily basis. What is our intention when we interact with people? Many of us are going to do various things during the day. What is our intention when we do those things? So it's not hard to get the requisite knowledge to make an intention behind everything that is that you do. It's not hard. The harder thing is to be present with Allah so that you actually make that intention on a daily basis, on those in relation to those various things that you do every single day. That's really the harder part. The knowledge component can be learned in a very short period of time. But this is what they meant when they said they used to teach us the intention the way that we would be taught the Fatiha, systematically, so that it became easy for them to then intend. Because the intention relates to motivation, the more you learn about it and the more time you spend on it, the easier that it is then to incorporate into your life. So here, what we've been talking about now is just to solidify in our minds, which it's very clear, the nature of this dunya is one of tribulation. The dunya is only reflecting naturally what is a part of its nature. And then after we understand that, so this is where we begin. You have to have the correct conception. You have to hammer that into your heart time and time again. And after we understand that, then you have to really reflect deeply upon that reality until it reaches the point that when you look at the world, that's how you view it, and you're not deluded. Okay? So we stated what we know. It's nothing really new, anything that was just been stated. But now the key is for the spiritual path, as they say, in yuwattan nafsahu, is that we get ourselves used to this reality. We've hammered it in our soul so many times that this is simply the way that we see the world. So the next time that you have a dunyawi opportunity, but you have to compromise your deen to attain that, it doesn't affect you whatsoever. Because you've spent that time reflecting al-fikr as-sahih, with very powerful, effective, deep reflection, where now you understand the world as it is. And we go back to that metaphor that was previously mentioned. It's like having that nasty, disgusting, pardon my French, loogie in the midst of that beautiful dessert that looks so tasty and sweet. But inside of it, someone cleared their throat, and it's nasty and green. And keep describing it and just use your imagination. It's right there in the middle of that cupcake or that cookie or that piece of pumpkin pie or whatever you like to eat. And you're eating it, and the people that know are like, that is disgusting. They're cringing, and you're loving it. Oh, this is delicious. Sakada. People that know that it's disgusting. And people who don't know are just living it up and enjoying it. That becomes so firm in the way that you view the world. Now, it doesn't mean that we become prudes. There's permissible desires that are perfectly fine for you to take part in a lawful manner. In a lawful manner with the right intention. So we're not prudes. We're not people that don't ever indulge in any of the desires of this world. No, there are many of the awliya who had fine clothing, that lived in nice dwellings. And Imam Abu Hassan al-Shadi, you say, barridul ma', make the water cold. Because when you drink cold water, is that khalis al-shukr, that, unadulterated gratitude comes from your heart. So there are plenty of awliya of the past that had nice things, but their hearts were detached from it. And Allah loves to see the traces of His blessing on His servant, but with the right intention. Not just indulging in the dunya for the sake of indulging in the dunya. So the first step to really putting this into practice is really spending time reflecting on the true nature of the dunya. And again, as we keep saying, you have to do this. There's a secret in reflection. When you take that time and spend that time reflecting, the next time you're exposed to something of the world, your perspective will be different. It will impact you. And if you do that consistently, then that's the way that you'll view the world. And you will be very careful about the decisions that you make, what you choose to do, where you go, who you spend time with, and so forth and so on. Because you understand that the nature of this world is khalas, that what's it really going to do for you? Especially if you're traveling the spiritual path and you've been in environments that are intensely spiritual and intensely radiant with light. And then you get out of those environments, you're like, whoa. In the moment, your nafs is just like, I just want to be free. I just want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. I just want to eat this or drink that. And then one meal you overeat and you're like, what was I thinking, Ya Allah? Like, khalas. I remember in the days of Mauritania, it was just like, I just wish I could have a cup of orange juice. That's all I want. Is like, as soon as I get on the plane, I'm going to have a cup of orange juice. It's like you drink nasty, the unnatural, concentrate. It's filled with unhealthy sugar. And the nafs loves it. And then you're just like, oh. The natural drinks that they serve are much better for your health and even taste it better. The point is that the dunya is a mirage. Get it? And you think that it's going to fulfill you, and then it leaves you empty. The wise are those who realize that and don't go chasing the mirage, because you keep going, but the dunya, you're never going to ultimately achieve what you want from it. So we have to think time and time again about the true nature of the world and to hammer that into the heart. And then secondly, i.e. the second way that we can put this into practice is, after recognizing the dunya for what it is and seeing it for what it is, we should prepare ourselves for tribulation. We should actively prepare ourselves for tribulation and be expecting tribulation in one way or the other. Our wealth, our health, our family, our friends, some other person, something. The weather, whatever. Something could happen anytime. And you're prepared for it. And you're prepared first and foremost with your iman. And you're preparing yourself too, that if you're put in a position to respond in a way that is pleasing to Allah Ta'ala. So closely related to this idea of preparation is that we don't seek repose or rest in this world. What that means is not that we don't take time off, not that we don't take vacations, not that we don't relax. We do all of those things, but with the intention of strengthening ourselves for worship. You have to rest. Rest is good for you. If you make a righteous intention, you'll get reward for resting. However, the point of resting is not just to rest. The point of the world is not just to relax and to enjoy it for the sake of enjoying it. There's no raha in this dunya. And there's these beautiful lines of poetry where he speaks of these meanings. So he says, يُمَثِّلُ ذُو اللُّبِّ فِي لُبِّهِ شَدَائِدُهُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنْزِلَ. ذُو اللُّبِّ is the intelligent one. And yumathil is to bring them to mind. He imagines them in his mind. What does he imagine? Shada'id, difficult circumstances, yani tribulations. So the intelligent person will prepare themselves by thinking about various tribulations that could happen before قبل أن تنزل, before they happen. فَنَزَلَتْ بَغْضَةً يعني فجأة. So if they happen suddenly, لم يرى or لم ترى, he that won't be scared by them. He won't be fearful. لما كان في نفسه مثلا, because he's already previously thought about it in his mind that this is a possibility and was prepared for it. رأى الأمر يفضي إلى آخر فسير آخره أولا. He'll see that some affairs lead to others, and then the way that the first will then be like the things that happen at the end. In other words, the nature of this dunya is there's always something happening. At some point in your life, there will be difficulties that come your way. وَذُو الْجَهْلِ, the ignorant one, يَأْمَنُ أَيَامَهُ, feels safe and secure in relation to his days. Nothing's going to happen to me. You'll hear people say, I'm going to live till I'm 100 years old. And they plan their retirement and they want to be in this community. And Now, outwardly, some retirement communities are very nice. And someone might live on a golf course and it's just very quiet and they don't have to take care of lawns, so they just have rocks there and people have to be a certain age sometimes to even live there. It's like also a bit empty. And people should go to bed early. That's a good thing. It's a sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ. But when you have nothing else to do, because you've lived an empty life, and if you've ever seen retirement communities, let alone that nursing homes, you see how, Allah, like depressing some of these places are. And you compare that to seeing the awliya at the end of their lives. People in a state of istighraq, immersed in the dhikr of Allah. It's like you choose. You want that or you want that? It's just like there's no comparison. That's what you want. You don't want that. Empty. Empty. Ya Latif. Not how we want to be. And we live in a society where people don't even visit, elderly people. They consider a burden to go visit their family members. Ya Latif. That's not how we want to be. We want to be people who, at the end of our lives, are immersed in the meanings of remembrance of our Lord, subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَنْسَى مَسَارِ مَنْ قَدْ خَلَى. And this person just forgets everything that happened to the people who came before him, and specifically all the different ways that they died. فَإِنْدَهَمَتُ صُرُوفُ الزَّمَانِ بِبَعْضِ مَصَائِبِهِ أَعْوَلًا. And so that if he is then afflicted by various tribulations that happen in time, and then he's all of a sudden incapacitated and unable to respond. وَلَوْ قَدَّمَ الْحَزْمَ فِي نَفْسِهِ. Were he to have thought about this ahead of time and been judicious, لَعَلَّمَهُ الصَّبْرَ عِنْدَ الْبَلَاءِ. That it would have taught him how to be patient when he was experiencing tribulation. And this is something that Sayyidina Imam al-Jafar al-Sadiq radiallahu anhu said, مَنْ طَلَبَ مَا لَمْ يُخْلَقْ أَتْعَبَ نَفْسُهُ وَلَمْ يُرْزَقْ. Whoever seeks something that's not been created will tire himself out and he won't ever achieve what he's seeking. He won't be provided it. And someone said, well, what are you referring to? He says, al-raha fi dunya. It's wanting to have some type of repose here in this world. It won't ever happen. Even if you have it for a temporary period of time, even if you have it for decades, at some point it's going to go. It's not the nature of this dunya. Are you seeking, there's so many different lines of poetry that speak about this, lines of wisdom. Are you seeking repose in the abode of difficulty? That a person who seeks something that never can happen is a failure. That's a sign of a failure. It never can happen, but you're seeking it. You're doing everything you can to attain it, but you know it can't ever happen. SubhanAllah. And the third aspect here of how we can put it into practice. So the first is to hammer the true perspective into our hearts over and over again. And then secondly, based upon that, we prepare ourselves to go through tribulations and that we bring to mind what potentially could happen so that we're ready when we're afflicted with it in the moment. And then thirdly, we teach ourselves and we learn how it is to be patient, at least. At least. And better yet is that we move up in the degrees of contentment, ridha. And contentment is not something you can just say to yourself, oh, I'm going to be content, and then you become content. It doesn't work like that. We all know that we need to be content. But if you would lose one of your children, la qadar Allah, would we really be content or would we just be patient? Will we be afflicted with something really serious? Right? Spirituality is not a game. It's not just lip service. True spirituality is action. So we're studying this as brothers and sisters to help remind ourselves, and no claims are being made. We all need reminders here. But the hope is that if we try day in and day out to inculcate patience within ourselves, and move towards a degree of contentment. We have teachers that we learn from and that we try to put their teachings into practice. And we read the Quran with reflection. We read the words of the Rasul and the books of the Qawm with reflection. We try to put into practice. Hope is that Allah Ta'ala will grant us that state and help us move up in its degrees. But at very least, we have to be patient. And we have to force ourselves to be patient. And if we strive to be patient, Allah will assist us and help us to be patient. But as Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab said, is that if a decree is going to happen, you being impatient doesn't change the decree. It's going to happen wherever. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. And you being patient just means that you get reward for it. And Allah will make it easier on you. Patience helps you endure that tribulation. But if we panic or we complain about the divine decree, we just become sinful, and it actually makes things worse internally. So then the last thing that we will say here is that there's a very in-depth, beautiful commentary that Sidi Ahmed ibn Ajiba has on this hikmah. And he speaks about it in a more mystical sense, about the various tajalliyat, divine manifestations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether they be jalaliya or jamaliya, manifestations of majesty or of beauty. And what he says here is that it tends to be the case here in the world is that we have more manifestations that are jalaliya. It's the nature of the world. But we have jalaliya and jamaliya. As for the hereafter, la ilaha illallah, that's different. In bliss eternally. But as long as we're here in this world, we will go through these different experiences, and that there'll be times where that there's majestic manifestations, and there'll be times that there are beautiful manifestations. And the key is that we respond to them in the ways that are pleasing to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and we be in a state of submission to Allah and move up in the degrees of that closest to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, where ultimately what we want to have in the heart is rida, and being content with the divine decree of our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we put this hikmah into practice in this way, then inshallah ta'ala it will facilitate for us everything that is that we do here in this dunya, and that without the correct conception of the world and understanding its true nature, will be very limited in how we can traverse the spiritual path. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala give us tawfiq, bless us in all of our affairs, open up the doors for understanding for all of us, Ya Arhamar Rahmeen. And that may we all benefit from these blessed words. May inshallah ta'ala, Allah ta'ala facilitate our understanding and practice of them. Fi khairin wultun afiyah wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadan wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.